They clapped until the screen froze. The graphs stopped moving, the projected numbers disappeared, and in their place, just one sentence. Don't steal what you didn't build. A silence fell across the conference room, the kind that crawls into your skin and makes you feel like the lie was yours, even if it wasn't. Cameron looked around, confused, sweating under the lights. Investors leaned forward. One of them stood up, whispering to an assistant. Another checked his phone. And me? I was just one face in the crowd. No stage, no spotlight, no name on the program. But that sentence, it was mine. I remember writing it, half asleep, half furious, on the very last night, before I walked out without a single goodbye. I'd coded the line into a dummy failsafe, a bug that would only activate under one specific condition. Success without me. I left it not to destroy anything, but to remind them what they chose to forget. That page wasn't just lines of code. It reminded me I actually built something solid, something they couldn't ruin, no matter what they tried. And Cameron, he didn't know that in stealing what I created, he triggered the one thing I didn't leave behind. Me. So no, this story isn't about revenge. It's about remembering who I was before I started trying to prove myself to people who were only ever taking notes on how to erase me. He handed me a sticky note. Just a name and a meeting time I wasn't invited to. No explanation. No smile. Just that familiar tap on my desk before walking off, already mid-call with someone else. That was the first crack. Cameron used to ask me about every idea, every tweak to the interface. We built that prototype side by side in borrowed office space with flickering lights and coffee from dented thermoses. He called it ours. He said we'd never become like them, those VC-funded guys who forget where they started. I believed him. Maybe too much. Because slowly, the we started disappearing from his sentences. He stopped showing me the decks before pitching. He changed the company's Slack password, said it was a cleanup thing. He made design decisions on his own and announced them like a boss, not a partner. At first, I told myself I was just overreacting. Maybe he was tired. Maybe I was tired. But then he began booking rooms without looping me in, pushing updates without my commits. And when I gently asked, "Hey, did something shift in our roles?" he just smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "You're overthinking again." I've got it covered. It wasn't the words. It was how he said it. Like I'd become a risk he had to manage. I remember going home that night with a headache behind my left eye, staring at our old whiteboard photos on my phone and wondering if I'd missed some early signal, something subtle, something I chose not to see, because truth is, the signs were there, in the way he skipped our standing lunch, the way he took meetings behind closed doors and said things like, "Let me take the lead on this one. Investors expect a certain image." I used to think we were equals, but slowly, I was being uninvited from the thing I helped create, and I hadn't even realised I'd already started leaving, one silent omission at a time. The announcement came on a Tuesday. I wasn't in the room when it happened. They were launching a founding team spotlight on the company website, investor-facing, media-facing. He called it strategic storytelling. I wasn't mentioned, not in the bios, not in the photos, not in the story of how the idea began. On my couch, with my sketches and his pitch voice, I waited a day, then another. No correction came, no apology. Just a Slack message from Cameron. "We're simplifying the narrative for press. Hope you're cool with that." Simplifying. That word stuck. That week, HR reached out, asked me to review an updated job title, Product Advisor. I read it twice, then again. I'd been co-founder. I had early design patents with both our names, shared the first losses, built the first demo from scratch while he charmed seed investors with that polished confidence of his. Now, product advisor. No one said anything out loud, but the glances changed. Ryan stopped looping me in on dev calls. Maya, our marketing lead, stumbled when introducing me in meetings. Even my keycard access was downgraded. No more access to the executive floor. One night, I stayed late, walked past a glassed-in war room where Cameron was mapping out launch strategies with 2 new hires I didn't recognize. He didn't wave, didn't look up, like I was a ghost passing through a company I still legally co-owned. I stood there longer than I should have, my reflection staring back at me in the glass. That was when I started saving copies of everything: emails, slides, wireframes with metadata, old GitHub commits. It wasn't revenge, not yet. It was survival, because no one tells you what betrayal feels like when it's done by someone who once called you family. The prototype went live on a Friday. I wasn't told. I found out from a tweet. "Big leap today for the team at Dynapath," it said, with Cameron's name tagged and mine missing. I clicked the link, watched the demo, recognized every screen, every transition, every piece of UX. I stayed up until 3 a.m. building. But now, the voiceover credited it to our brilliant engineering team. I wasn't angry, not at first. I felt cold, like something inside me had quietly closed. I called Ryan. His voice dropped when he picked up. Like he'd been expecting this, he said, "Look, I didn't know they were pushing it this fast." But he did. He'd committed the last update himself, and I'd seen his initials on the new codebase that quietly excluded my module. The final straw came 2 days later, Sunday evening. I walked into the office to grab my charger, only to find the locks had changed. The front desk guy looked apologetic, said, "There's a new access list, only C-levels after hours." I stood there holding a bag of takeout, Thai food, the same dish Cameron and I always ordered after long coding sprints. It went cold in my hands as I realized I was no longer on the team. I went home, put the food in the fridge, didn't touch it, opened my laptop and typed my resignation. It was short, formal, but I CC'd legal. Then I opened a folder titled Proof. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I'd built this thing with my name, my nights, my sleepless worry, and I wasn't going to let anyone rewrite me out of my own story. The first morning was quiet. No Slack pings, no daily stand-up, just me, my laptop, and a room that still smelled like curry from 3 nights ago. I didn't shower, I didn't change, but I opened Figma, then Notion, then my old whiteboard, the one I'd used before Cameron joined. It still had the sketch from my first build, half erased, but mine. That felt grounding. So I started, not from scratch, but from before, back when the idea still felt like mine, before it got polished, diluted, and stripped of its soul. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't fast. I coded in sweats, ate noodles, slept on the couch. Some nights the imposter syndrome hit so hard I just stared at the screen pretending to debug while silently falling apart. But the difference this time, no one was watching, which meant no pressure, no performative meetings, no one to impress. Just me building again. I emailed a few friends, old beta testers, told them I was rebooting something personal. No pitch, no promises, just curiosity. 2 of them replied within an hour, said they missed the first version, said it had heart. I didn't know if I believed that, but it kept me going. Day turned into week into 2, and slowly my notebook started filling up again, with bugs, yes, but also with moments that worked, like when the calendar finally synced, or when the onboarding flow didn't crash. I started recording short videos of myself testing features, not for anyone, just to track progress. But when I looked back at those clips later, I noticed something odd. I was smiling again, not wide, not dramatic, just enough to remind me I wasn't gone. She was still here, the version of me before the decks, before the meetings, before Cameron. And she knew how to build quietly, relentlessly. The first sign that it was working wasn't from an investor. It was from a 17-year-old girl named Anya. She sent a one-line message through the app's tiny feedback form. This helped me organize my school project without crying. Thank you. That was it. I stared at it for a full minute, then longer. It wasn't about traction. It was about someone using something I made and feeling less alone because of it. I screenshotted the message, pinned it to the top of my dashboard, and whispered, "We're not crazy, we're just early." 2 days later, a local podcast host messaged me on Twitter. Said a friend told her I was rebuilding the original tool before the suits touched it. She asked if I wanted to talk. I said yes, but with my camera off. The interview dropped 3 days later. It was raw. I spoke like I was talking to myself. But something about that honesty stuck. By the weekend, my waitlist doubled, then tripled. An old mentor emailed, "Saw the interview. Your voice is steadier now, like you know who you're building for." I didn't reply right away. I just read it, twice, because that was the recognition that mattered most. Not from press, not from people in suits, but from someone who saw me before I got lost in proving things. People started reaching out quietly. Designers, solo devs, even a teacher from Ohio who wanted to use the tool for her special ed students. And slowly, without any fanfare, without any launch party, my inbox became something new, a thread of tiny lights, each one saying, "Yes, this matters." And in those late nights, when my hand cramped from typing and my eyes burned from too much screen time, I would open Anya's message again, the one with no emojis, no links, just soft gratitude, and I'd whisper it back. "Thank you." I stopped checking Cameron's LinkedIn. I stopped wondering who he'd hired, who he was pitching, what headlines he might appear in next, because something shifted, not all at once, but in small, invisible layers. At the coffee shop I worked from, a barista asked what I was building. I paused, then said it out loud for the first time, not defensively, not nervously, just plainly. A tool for neurodivergent creators. Simple, flexible, distraction-free. She smiled, said her brother might love that. I smiled back, not because it was validation, but because it felt natural. That night, I updated the About page, removed the old mission statement with all the buzzwords, wrote something shorter. We build for the ones who've been told to fit in when they were made to break molds. And it felt like breathing again. The code wasn't perfect. The UX was still clunky, but it worked. And more importantly, it was mine. I wore the same hoodie every day, still ate instant noodles at midnight, still couldn't afford paid ads. But I didn't flinch when people asked if I was a founder. Yes, I'd say, and that was enough. No pitch deck, no bio. No LinkedIn titles padded with fluff. Just a quiet confidence that I didn't have when I was sitting across from Cameron, hoping he'd see me as an equal. Now, I didn't need his eyes to measure my worth. My rhythm had changed, not louder, just steadier. And in that steadiness, I found something even better than success. I found peace. I was mid-debug when the subject line popped up. Dell Tech alumni, honouring 10 years of innovation. At first, I thought it was spam. Then I saw the sender, officedeltechnetwork.org, and the body of the email was even worse than I expected. "We're inviting you and your former co-founder, Cameron Holt, to present the origins of Founder OS at the upcoming alumni gala." I froze. Not because they got the story wrong, but because the name still stung. Founder OS. the name we dreamed up over ramen in my third-floor apartment when we still believed people like us could build something clean, something good. They'd put it on stage, rewritten, repackaged, rebranded, as if the betrayal was just part of a glossy success story. Attached to the email was a glossy flyer, Cameron's face-centered, polished, his title, CEO and co-founder, Found OOS. My name, tucked below, smaller, like a footnote. I almost deleted it, almost blocked the sender, but then I saw who was CC'd, Ryan, and for some reason, that hit harder than the rest. Ryan had been the first intern to walk through our makeshift office. He used to bring donuts on Mondays. He cried the day we launched our first beta, and now he was going to sit in that room while Cameron told our story like it was his alone. I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. Instead, I sat back, closed my laptop, and stared at the flyer one more time. There was a line beneath the event date, Rebuilding the Future, Stories of Resilience. I scoffed out loud. What did they know about resilience? My fingers hovered over the trackpad. I highlighted the flyer image, saved it. Not because I planned to attend, but because something inside me was no longer content with silence. Something had shifted since I wrote that Knew About page, since I stopped whispering what I built and started owning it. I didn't know what I'd do next, but I knew one thing. If I ever walked into that room, it wouldn't be as a footnote. I didn't sleep that night. The email kept flashing in my mind. Ryan's name in the CC line, Cameron's smug smile on that flyer, and that ridiculous tagline, Stories of Resilience. It felt like a joke, except the punchline was me. I got up around 3 a.m., made tea I didn't drink, and opened the flyer again. I zoomed in on the image. Cameron in that sleek charcoal suit. He looked like he belonged there. I didn't. Not anymore. That used to be my stage too, before I learned that ideas alone aren't enough. You have to protect them. And sometimes, protect yourself from the people who once clapped for you. I opened a blank document, typed out a reply. Thank you for the invitation. Unfortunately, I stared at the blinking cursor. My hands hovered, then froze. Unfortunately what? Unfortunately, I don't want to relive what you erased. Unfortunately, I'm still stitching myself back together after watching my name get edited out of every pitch deck and press release. No, that wasn't the whole truth, because part of me did want to go, not for the applause, not even for the recognition, but because something inside me still burned for clarity, not revenge, just clarity, a moment where I could say, I was there, I mattered, and I remember everything. The kettle clicked off behind me. I let the silence stretch, and then I heard a soft knock on the door. It was Ms. Dell, hair in her usual tight twist, holding 2 mugs of ginger tea. She didn't say anything, just sat beside me and placed 1 mug in front of my laptop. After a long pause, she finally said, "When the world tries to forget you, you don't fight by yelling louder. You show up with your own story." That was all. No speeches, no life lessons, just that one line. She left before I could reply, but it stayed long after the tea cooled. By morning, I knew exactly what I would wear. Not to impress, to remind. Black, wide-leg trousers, a soft navy top clean, simple, no logos, just presence. I packed light, notebook, charger. The flash drive I once swore I'd never touch again, the one with the early build, the original wireframes and back-end I coded myself, before they started streamlining me out of my own idea. I didn't know yet if I'd use it, but I wanted it near me, just in case. Downstairs, Ms. Dell was watering the herbs by the kitchen window. She glanced at my bag and didn't say a word, only handed me a folded envelope. "For the ride," she said. Inside was a train ticket, first class. I blinked. She just smiled. You don't show up small. I hugged her longer than I meant to. On the train, I sketched everything on a napkin, the layout of the conference room, where I might sit, what questions I'd ask, if I chose to stand up at all. I wasn't sure I'd confront Cameron directly. He didn't deserve the drama or the airtime, but maybe, just maybe, he deserved to see me there, whole, calm, unafraid. I wasn't going back to burn it down. I was going to stand where they thought I wouldn't return and take back the silence they once mistook for weakness. At the hotel, I passed by the ballroom early, rows of white chairs, a giant LED screen flashing tomorrow's schedule. His name was printed big. Mine wasn't there, but I wasn't surprised. People like him often forget the hands that shaped their spotlight. That's why I came, to remind them we don't always make noise. Sometimes we just show up with everything they couldn't erase. I didn't walk in alone. Jared met me outside the venue. Grey suit, no tie, coffee in hand, same amused half smile, like we were about to pull off something casual but consequential. Still want me to pretend I'm just a +1? He asked. I nodded. They don't need to know what you know. Not yet. He held the door open. Inside, the air buzzed low hums, rehearsed greetings, a wall of branded banners, the kind of polished chaos that startups call opportunity. My heels clicked against the marble floor, each step steadier than the last. People glanced, then turned away. Some recognized me, but no one said my name, not yet. Cameron stood on stage, buttoned up, charming, selling our story like he'd lived it alone. Jared whispered, "He's still using the deck you built." I didn't flinch, just watched as the slides played, my original diagrams, colour shifted slightly, but still mine. That one flowchart I hand-sketched in a diner at 2 a.m. He'd kept it, didn't even bother redrawing it. It was like watching someone recite your diary in someone else's voice. We kept walking, closer, until I saw Ryan at the booth. He froze when he saw me, held his breath. The name tag around his neck looked heavier than it should. I didn't stop. But I saw him drop his eyes, and that was enough. Jared leaned in. What now? I nodded toward the side panel area. We wait, let him finish his pitch. Then, I'll introduce myself properly. He raised an eyebrow. And if he doesn't recognize you? I smiled. Oh, he will. We found 2 empty seats near the middle row. Not front, not back, just visible enough. Cameron's voice rang out. And finally, I'd like to share what makes our platform so secure. He clicked to the next slide. The screen blinked, then glitched. A single message appeared. Don't steal what you didn't build. Gasps, silence, and all at once, every head turned toward us. The applause never came, just scattered murmurs, like the sound of a room forgetting how to clap. Cameron cleared his throat, tried to click to the next slide, but it stayed frozen. That one sentence still burned on the screen, white text on black. Don't steal what you didn't build, he stammered. Looks like a technical glitch, please, give us a moment. But eyes had already moved past the projector. To me, Jared stayed seated, calm as ever. I didn't need to stand. I just looked at Cameron, and he knew. He stepped off stage early. There was no Q&A, no handshake line, no champagne pop. Only silence. The post-pitch reception had already begun in the adjacent lounge. A sleek room with gold-rimmed glasses and investor name cards lined up like trophies. I walked in slowly. The room shifted. People parted subtly, as if unsure whether to approach or pretend they didn't see me. Ryan stood near the bar, holding a glass of sparkling water that hadn't moved in 10 minutes. His girlfriend whispered something, and left. Quickly. "I didn't know he'd use the deck," Ryan said when I passed. I stopped. "You helped him?" He swallowed hard. "At first, yeah. I didn't think he'd delete me from everything or say it was all his." He didn't answer. I walked past. Then I heard it. A slow clap. Jared. He wasn't clapping for Cameron. "That was some real innovation," he said aloud, smiling. Every head turned again. He wasn't being sarcastic, just honest. "She built a trap that only activates when liars present it." I let that sit, and finally stepped onto the low platform where the product demo had taken place. The screen behind me flickered back to normal, but I didn't use it. I didn't need slides, just breath. "Hi, I'm the founder of what you just saw." People leaned in. I built the first line of code in a shared workspace. I pitched it to Cameron when we had coffee and no money, and I got erased until today. A pause. No drama, just presence. This isn't revenge, it's a reminder. Cameron stood by the edge of the room, jaw tight. He looked like he wanted to speak, but didn't know how to rewrite what had just happened. Someone handed him a drink. He didn't touch it. I stayed on the platform, not performing, just standing. Then I saw her, Ms. Dell. She stepped in quietly through the side door, wearing that same blue blazer she used to keep on the back of her office chair. She didn't wave, just nodded once, like a small, "You're doing fine." Cameron noticed her too, and that's when it cracked. He moved closer. "You always needed to make it personal," he said under his breath. Louder than he realized. People heard. I turned to him. "You made it personal when you took my name off." He scoffed. "I made it successful. You wouldn't have landed Jared on your own." I didn't blink. He came because of the product, not the pitch. Then Ryan spoke. Out of nowhere. "She built it, Cam." Silence again. Ryan looked like his voice surprised even himself. "You told me she'd quit, that she didn't want to finish it." Cameron stared at him. "You said it was dead code." Ryan looked down. It wasn't. That was it. That was the spark. Not an explosion, not a scream. Just the sound of loyalty snapping in half. People started murmuring again. Whispers turned to comments. Investors checked their phones. Some quietly stepped out. A woman in a grey suit leaned toward Jared. He nodded, slowly. Then he stood up. "I'm rescinding my interest in Cameron's entity, effective immediately." Just like that. A formal tone in a room built for cocktails and charm. Cameron's face flushed. "You'll regret that," he hissed. Jared just smiled. "I regret wasting time." Then he looked at me. "We should talk, founder to founder," and walked out. Cameron stood frozen. The silence around him wasn't just quiet, it was empty. People didn't avoid him, they just didn't see him anymore. I stepped down from the platform. Ms. Dell met me near the hallway. She touched my shoulder lightly. "They heard you. This time they really heard you." And for the first time in years, I believed that too. I didn't rush out. I waited. Watched the last guests murmur their goodbyes, grabbing coats, clutching opinions they wouldn't say out loud. Cameron stayed near the bar, alone, still gripping the same untouched glass. He didn't look at me again, and I didn't give him the satisfaction of a final stare. I walked slowly toward the hallway, my heels soft against the polished floor. Ms. Dell had already left, quiet as she came. Ryan had vanished too, only the scent of perfume and ambition lingered. When I reached the coat check, the woman behind the counter smiled, held out a familiar item. "This was left for you," she said. A small notebook. Mine, the one I thought was gone. Worn edges, soft leather cover. A faint mark where the ink had once bled through. Inside, just one page, folded, and a paperclip. Ryan's handwriting. "I kept this safe. I should have spoken up sooner. But you always believed in things before anyone else did. I see that now. No apology, but enough truth. I tucked the notebook into my bag. Then I stepped outside. Cool air wrapped around me. Not punishing, just honest. I didn't call a car, didn't need a destination. I just walked, away from the building, away from stolen credits and awkward claps. No one chased after me, no one needed to, because I wasn't leaving in defeat. I was leaving with exactly what I came to reclaim. My voice. The city was half asleep. Streetlights flickered like they were undecided, and my feet just kept moving. No destination, just silence, stretching long between stoplights. Somewhere near 9th and Green, I passed a little restaurant, the kind with fogged-up windows and $2 signs. And just like that, my body stopped walking before I even knew why. Thai food, coriander, lemongrass, a hint of chili in the cold air. My stomach tightened. It hit me then, that night, years ago. The first time Cameron and I pitched the idea, we'd ordered takeout from this exact place. Sat on the floor of my old apartment with laptops on our knees, pad thai in plastic containers, and dreams too loud for that tiny living room. He told me then, "This will change everything. You know that, right?" And I believed him, not because of the idea, but because of the fire in his voice. Because for a second, I thought we were building something together, not just a company, a future. But now, standing here, alone, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to say out loud. He never believed in the idea, not really. He believed in how useful I was, how much ground I could cover while he talked. I stepped closer to the window. Inside, a couple was laughing, their hands tangled across the table. No pitch decks, no hidden motives, just noodles and affection. And suddenly, that old craving I'd buried deep inside me for trust, for fairness, for something real, rose back to the surface. Not just for business, but for myself. I didn't need revenge or applause or a seat at Cameron's table. I needed a new one, my own. I walked back to my apartment with the cold clinging to my coat sleeves like an old friend who didn't know when to let go. The lights were still off. I didn't turn them on. Instead, I reached for the notebook, the one with coffee stains on the corner, the one I nearly threw out more than once. Inside, page after page of half-formed sketches, scratched out flowcharts and words I only ever whispered to myself, ideas that weren't polished, but they were mine. One page stuck out, a folded edge with a circle drawn in red ink. At the top, I'd written, "What if we built it for people, not just profit?" I smiled. That version of me, messy, idealistic, relentless, still lived here, not in the code, but in the question. I tore that page out, folded it slowly, and placed it inside the pocket of my coat. Not for nostalgia, not to hold on, but to carry forward. Then I did something I hadn't planned. I lit a candle, sat cross-legged on the floor, and one by one, I tore out the rest, the whole notebook. Cameron didn't get this part, the messy part, the part that didn't look good in a deck, and that's why he lost. Not because he got caught, but because he never really saw what mattered. The vision wasn't in the product, it was in the process, in the way I refused to flatten myself just to fit into someone else's pitch. The paper burned slowly, orange, curling at the edges, turning my past into ash. I watched without flinching because it wasn't destruction, it was release. When it was done, I opened the window, let the smoke rise, let the cold back in. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was rebuilding from nothing. I was building from choice. Smoke still lingered in the corners of my apartment. But in my chest, there was quiet. That kind of quiet that feels like you've finally stopped explaining yourself to people who never listened. I sat down still in my coat and let my eyes close for just a second. And then the memory came, not a sharp one, not one that screamed, just a kitchen, old, cramped, with yellow tiles and chipped mugs, and Cameron, laughing. He was hunched over the table, scribbling something on a napkin. I was by the stove, stirring noodles from a box. Cheap dinner, early days. And I said something like, "One day, this sketch will be worth millions." He looked up, not mocking, not greedy, just proud. "Not if we forget who it's for," he said. I'd forgotten he said that, forgotten it was him who said it first, and in that moment, the kitchen, the quote, the fire still in my lungs. I didn't feel angry. I felt tired, because maybe Cameron wasn't always the villain. Maybe he just got scared somewhere along the way, scared the napkin wouldn't be enough, scared no one would notice unless he made it shiny, and in trying to prove he mattered, he forgot the part that did. The kitchen, the laugh, the napkin, that quote. What if we built it for people, not just profit? It wasn't mine. It was ours. But only one of us kept believing it. I opened my eyes, looked down at the folded page in my coat pocket. The only piece I saved, and I whispered, "I still believe it." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the truth. And sometimes that's the first door that opens. I didn't call him, didn't text, didn't draft a long email with bullet points of betrayal, but I went back to the space where it all started, the old co-working hub downtown, still had the same broken elevator button, still smelled like coffee and unfinished ideas. Ms. Dell was there, of course. She looked up and smiled like nothing had changed. "Took you long enough," she said, handing me tea I didn't ask for. I sat, and for the first time in weeks, I let the words come without sharp edges. I thought taking it back would make me feel powerful, but it didn't. "Not really." She nodded. "It's because it was never about power," she said. "It was about peace." I stared at my cup, watched the steam curl like the smoke from that burned notebook. I had imagined screaming at Cameron, imagined walking into his office and dropping the code he never cracked. But that fantasy felt small now, because the truth is, I didn't want revenge. I wanted my name back, my time, my why. And strangely, I already had it. When you stop trying to be heard by the person who silenced you, you hear yourself again. That night, I finally wrote his name in my journal. Just his name. Not what he did. Not what I lost. Then I wrote mine, right underneath. 2 names, no arrows, no rage, just space, and a quiet kind of truth. He stole a product, but he couldn't steal the person who built it. And when I closed the journal, I didn't feel righteous. I felt free. The last thing I packed wasn't my laptop, wasn't the prototype files or investor decks. It was the notebook. The one with the burn mark across the spine and half-torn pages. The one that still smelled faintly of ink and one night of fire. I wrapped it in a piece of cloth, tied it with quiet fingers, no ceremony. Then I walked just past the bridge where the old tech office used to be, the one Cameron now claimed as his. The glass walls were still there, still clean, still watching. I didn't go in. I left the notebook on the front steps. No note. No message, just paper and ash, and every version of myself he thought he erased. And as I turned to leave, I saw him, across the street, half in shadow, wearing that same coat he always wore when he was nervous. He didn't move, didn't wave, just watched, like he couldn't tell if it was really me or just the echo of what he'd lost. I didn't give him more. No final line, no stare down. Some ghosts don't deserve resurrection. I walked past, steady, unshaken, and somewhere in my chest, the weight slid loose. Forgiveness wasn't for him. Closure wasn't his to hold. It was mine. And it looked a lot like an old notebook left behind in silence. Some people want revenge. Some want justice. Me, I just wanted my name back. Not in headlines, not on some press release, just in the story I told myself when no one else was listening. The notebook was gone now, and with it, the need to prove anything to anyone. I didn't need Cameron to apologise, didn't need the investors to clap, didn't even need Ryan to fix what he broke, because in the quiet, in the spaces between what almost happened and what didn't, I found something steadier than closure. I found me, the part of me that still builds things even when they're torn down, the part that still trusts even after betrayal, the part that burned but didn't turn to ash. People ask if I'll start another company, if I'll take legal action, if I'll get even. Maybe, maybe not. But I'll keep writing, keep building, keep leaving quiet traps, not for others to fall into, but for me to remember. I was here, I mattered, and I made something that couldn't be erased. So tell me, have you ever let go of something you were never given credit for and still chose peace? Because sometimes the real power isn't in what you take back, it's in what you leave behind.